The city of Brightonville was known for its sleek skyline and fast-talking CEOs, where the grind never stopped and loyalty was often traded for leverage. But for Camille Hart, loyalty was everything. For 7 years, she had worked at Silver Pine Innovations, a boutique tech consulting firm owned by her father, Victor Hart, a name that held weight in the business world. Camille wasn't a manager. She didn't sit in glass offices or present at quarterly reviews. Her title? Client Services Coordinator, though most just called her the front desk girl. But titles didn't matter to her. She showed up early, stayed late, remembered birthdays, fixed back-end software glitches when IT failed, and personally smoothed over more than a few near disasters with clients. She never asked for recognition, only for respect. It was a Tuesday morning when her illusion of family and loyalty shattered. The office buzzed with routine, coffee brewing, keys clacking, and the low hum of idle conversation. Camille had just replaced the mints in the reception bowl and was reviewing the conference schedule on her tablet. The front lobby still smelled faintly of lavender, the scent her mother used to keep in the house when life was simpler. That was when Victor emerged from behind the frosted glass doors of the executive corridor, flanked by the board of directors. His voice was clipped. "Camille. Conference room 1. Now." She looked up, startled. There was no meeting scheduled with her. Still, she nodded, tucked her tablet under her arm, and followed. As she stepped into the room, she saw familiar faces seated along the oak table, partners, division leads, and at the far end, her older half-brother Brandon, already smirking. Victor didn't waste a second. He stood, buttoned his charcoal suit jacket, and said, "We've reviewed operations and staffing. Some changes are necessary." Camille sat down slowly. Victor's eyes locked on hers. "Your role has been reassessed. It's not a strategic position. We've determined it no longer aligns with the company's evolving direction." Her mind stalled. "I don't understand." "You're a receptionist," he replied. "You greet clients. Answer phones. That's not leadership. That's not where we're headed. You'll finish out the week, and HR will process your exit." Camille felt the ground tilt beneath her. "But," she began, voice shaking, "I've worked here since before the rebrand. I wrote half the onboarding documentation. I trained Devon, Alicia, even Brandon when he joined. I'm not just." "That's enough," Victor said, cutting her off. "This isn't personal. It's structural." Across the table, someone chuckled under their breath. Brandon leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying the show. No one looked at her. Not even the people she had once covered for, defended, supported. Camille stood on trembling legs. Her chair made no noise. Her dignity, she realized, was the only thing she still held. She reached the door, just as it opened. A tall man in a dark cobalt suit stepped into the boardroom like he belonged there. Mr. Desai, founder of Orion Systems, their largest and most prestigious client. He never arrived without an appointment. Never stepped foot inside the office unless there was a signed agreement waiting. He walked right past the boardroom table, ignoring the stunned faces, and stopped. "Where's Camille?" he asked. No one answered. Then his eyes met hers, still by the door. "There you are," he said, relief softening his expression. "I've been calling your line all morning. I had to stop by in person. I owe you a thank you." Camille blinked. "Me? For fixing the logistics nightmare with the R-Series prototype last week. You saved us 6 figures and 3 weeks of delays. I couldn't let that go unacknowledged." Victor's face had paled. Brandon looked like he'd swallowed a wasp. Mr. Desai turned to the room. "Last month I told Victor that this company's real value isn't in its tech stack. It's in its relationships. And Camille," he pointed directly at her, "is the reason we're still working with you." Silence. Utter silence. Camille didn't move. Mr. Desai gave her a handshake, warm and firm. "Keep being the glue," he said gently. Then turned and exited the room as suddenly as he had arrived. When the door closed behind him, no one spoke. Victor stared at the edge of the table, jaw clenched. Brandon shifted uncomfortably. Camille felt every eye flicker toward her, but not one held her gaze. She waited, for an apology, a reconsideration, anything. But nothing came. So she walked out. Back at her desk, she sat down and stared into the blank monitor. Her reflection, tired, stunned, but steady, looked back. Behind her, muffled voices resumed in the boardroom, rising like static. She couldn't hear the words, but she didn't need to. They were about her. By the end of the day, the whispers had started. One analyst offered her a coffee. A tech associate, whom she had once covered for during a deadline crisis, awkwardly dropped by to say hi. Word had spread. She left at exactly 5 o'clock. No overtime. No cleaning up other people's tasks. Just silence and the cold slap of autumn air outside the office doors. But instead of going home, she drove, past her apartment, past the skyline, until she reached the edge of the city, where an old cafe sat tucked between a bookstore and a record shop. She parked, engine off, and sat. Had she made herself too useful? So much so that she had become invisible? A knock on her window jolted her. It was Leah, a junior associate from the analytics team, holding 2 coffee cups. "I took a guess," she said shyly. "Figured this is where you'd go." Camille rolled down the window, smiling despite herself. "You talk about this place a lot," Leah said. "Especially when things feel heavy." They stood together in the cool dusk air, sipping quietly. Then Leah handed her a folded napkin. On it, 9 names were scribbled. "People who want to help," she explained. "People who remember what you've done for them. For this company." Camille unfolded the napkin, stared at the names, and tucked it into her coat pocket. She wasn't done. They had stripped her of a title. But not her worth. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, they'd remember exactly who they had tried to erase. The next morning, Camille Hart walked into the offices of Silver Pine Innovations not as a victim, but as someone who'd seen behind the curtain. The same security guard who barely used to look up gave her a respectful nod. The receptionist at the building's main entrance, who Camille had trained herself, smiled timidly and offered her a fresh copy of the day's visitor sheet. Inside, nothing had changed on the surface. Same walls. Same hurried staff. Same espresso-scented air. But beneath that, a subtle shift had taken place. People paused when Camille walked past. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Executives who once brushed by without a glance gave her curt, unsure nods. Even the CFO, Mr. Larkson, who'd never addressed anyone outside the C-suite directly, gave a polite morning as he passed her desk. It was like someone had whispered into the walls. "She matters now." Camille didn't smile. Didn't shrink. She sat at her front desk, straightened her files, and answered the phones with her usual calm precision. But this time, she didn't run after executives with forgotten copies or fetch last-minute coffee for board meetings she was never invited to. She performed her duties with quiet dignity, refusing to play the part of the invisible cog anymore. The fallout from Mr. Desai's visit was unfolding in whispers and stares. What none of them realized was that Camille wasn't planning a tantrum. She was planning a shift. By midweek, client emails started rolling in, one from a partner in Melbourne, another from an investor liaison in Toronto. All of them the same. "Can we speak with Camille? Please forward this directly to Camille Hart. Camille was handling our account, can she follow up?" Clients were no longer content with being passed off to junior execs. They wanted the woman who fixed problems without fuss. The one who remembered deadlines and birthdays. Who had quietly been the backbone of the company for years. Every request sent a ripple through the chain of command. Every bypass of a director or department head added another crack to the illusion of control. When Brandon caught her in the break room Thursday morning, he was flushed and edgy. "You need to stop," he hissed, voice low. Camille raised an eyebrow, calmly stirring her tea. "Stop what?" He leaned closer, scanning for eavesdroppers. "Don't play dumb. Clients calling you directly. Employees talking behind closed doors. You're stirring things up." Dad's furious. She sipped her tea, unbothered. Maybe he should have thought of that before humiliating me in front of the board. Brandon's jaw tightened. This isn't personal, it's restructuring. No, Camille said coolly. It's ego. He stared at her for a beat, then scoffed and stormed off. But his stiff shoulders and quickened steps betrayed what he refused to admit: he was nervous. Later that day, her phone buzzed. A message from Mara, Mr. Desai's assistant. Mr. Desai would like to personally invite you to the Orion Silverpine Leadership Dinner this Friday evening. Private event. Senior level only. Camille stared at the message, heart thudding. This wasn't just a gesture. It was a signal. Desai wasn't just supporting her, he was making a statement. She almost told someone. Drafted a text to her father. Then deleted it. Let him find out the way she had. The night of the dinner, she wore a sleek black dress, her hair pinned high like armor. The restaurant glowed with floor-to-ceiling windows, casting reflections across the harbor. Mr. Desai welcomed her with a firm handshake and a warm smile. You've been the most competent, consistent person we've dealt with, he said. If Silverpine doesn't see that, it's not your failure, it's theirs. Camille swallowed hard. Thank you. He leaned in. Off the record, how much do you want to stay there? She hesitated. A part of her wanted to walk away, build something new, start over somewhere she was valued from the beginning. But another part, the part that had carried this place on her back through crises, delays, and incompetent leadership, wanted to stay and finish what she'd started. I'm not done yet, she said finally. He nodded. Good. Because I might need your help. As she drove home under the glow of streetlights, Camille felt it, the power was shifting. Not in loud declarations, but in small, deliberate steps. By Monday, the change was undeniable. A meeting agenda, typically printed for only senior executives, was suddenly also on her desk. A junior director casually asked for her advice on a client pitch. Just curious, he said, but his eyes searched hers for insight. Even Brandon stopped by with a forced smile. Hey, everything okay this week? Camille tilted her head, smiling just enough to be polite. Everything's in motion. And it was. That same day, she met with Denise, a longtime marketing team member known for being sharp but cautious. Over lunch, Denise slid a flash drive across the table. What is it? Camille whispered. Meeting minutes. Memos. Internal emails they asked me to delete. Camille blinked. Why didn't you? Denise smiled. Because I've been underestimated too. That night, Camille stayed after hours. She plugged in the drive. The files confirmed what she already suspected: her dismissal hadn't been a sudden decision, it was a coordinated strategy. Emails between her father and Brandon with subject lines like phasing Camille out. Phrases like she's becoming too visible, and reframe her removal as operational necessity. The worst? A draft memo dated 2 weeks before the board meeting where she was blindsided, outlining how to shift her responsibilities to others and position her exit as a streamlining decision. She leaned back in her chair, heart pounding. They hadn't just dismissed her. They'd erased her. Planned it. Packaged it. And never once considered she might fight back. But they had made one critical mistake. You don't quietly erase the woman who's been the heartbeat of your company. Camille didn't rage. She didn't weep. She copied everything. One for herself. One for Mr. Desai. And one sealed envelope for whoever might need it later. She walked out of the building that night with her head held high, not as a pawn, but as someone about to flip the board. Friday arrived with the sharp chill of late autumn. Inside Silverpine Innovations, the mood was oddly electric. Staff moved quietly, eyes darting with speculation. The rumor mill was working overtime, especially since Camille had taken Thursday off. No one knew why. But some suspected. Especially those who had watched the company's most loyal employee rise from the ashes of dismissal like she was born for it. At exactly 10 a.m., a leadership meeting was called. Unusual timing, even more unusual participants. Camille, of course, Wasn't on the invite list. But she knew she'd be there. Across the city, Mr. Desai had confirmed, the joint venture between Orion Systems and Silver Pine would not move forward without Camille's presence in leadership. "It's not a preference," he'd said over the phone. "It's a requirement." That morning, dressed in slate gray slacks and a forest green blouse, Camille walked through Silver Pine's sliding doors not as the receptionist, but as the reckoning. From the corridor, she watched through the frosted glass as executives took their seats. Her father at the head. Her brother Brandon beside him. Mr. Desai sat calmly at the far end, briefcase in hand, his posture unshakable. The air inside that room was heavy, laced with uncertainty and the realization that something was slipping through their grasp. Camille waited 30 seconds. Then, as the doors slowly creaked open, every head turned. She stepped inside without a word. Mr. Desai stood, smiling slightly. "Camille. Please, join us." Victor Hart's eyes narrowed. "She's not on the leadership team." "She is now," Mr. Desai replied without missing a beat. Camille took the open chair beside him, her expression poised. The power in the room shifted, not loudly, but unmistakably. No one knew where to look. Their hierarchy had cracked. Mr. Desai began, his voice calm but firm. "Before we discuss next steps in the Orion partnership, I want to address something more foundational: trust." The word rang out like a bell, cutting through the silence. "I've watched this company for over a year. Observed how it operates, who keeps things moving. And frankly, I've grown concerned. Not about your numbers. About your culture." Victor bristled. "With all due respect, this isn't the platform." "This is exactly the platform," Mr. Desai said sharply. Then, he pulled a folder from his briefcase, Camille's folder. He opened it. Inside were printed emails, memos, timestamps, an unshakable timeline. A quiet expose. "I've reviewed documentation that shows a disturbing pattern," he continued, "a deliberate effort to isolate and remove Camille Hart, an employee responsible for maintaining several of your highest value client accounts, including mine. This wasn't oversight. This was orchestration." He slid the folder across the table to Victor. Victor didn't touch it. Brandon paled visibly. "This is absurd," Victor muttered. "She was just a receptionist. We gave her a job." "Never what?" Camille asked quietly. Victor turned to her, caught off guard. "Never worthy? Never qualified?" Her voice didn't shake. "Do you have any idea how many times I corrected your team's errors? How many clients I calmed, proposals I fixed, deadlines I salvaged?" The room went still. "I didn't do it for credit," she continued. "But I didn't do it to be erased either." Across the table, Denise from marketing, who had passed Camille the flash drive, gave a near imperceptible nod of support. Mr. Desai leaned forward. "Let me be clear. If Camille isn't part of this company's leadership moving forward, Orion Systems walks. And I suspect we won't be the only ones." Victor's voice turned sharp. "You're letting emotion cloud business." "No," Desai replied. "You did." A long silence followed. Then slowly, reluctantly, Victor opened the folder. As his eyes scanned the pages, his face drained of color. On page 2, the memo. "Phase Camille out gradually. Reassign her work to Brandon. Minimize client disruption. Frame as role consolidation." It was signed. Time-stamped. Uneditable. Victor finally looked up. "Camille. Why didn't you came to me?" She met his gaze. "I did. For 7 years." And for the first time in her life, he had no reply. As the meeting ended, no one spoke. Camille didn't gloat. She simply stood, nodded once to Mr. Desai, and exited without looking back. Power didn't need to be declared, it was recognized. By that afternoon, emails trickled out. Brandon Hart would be stepping down as VP effective immediately. No explanation. No statement. Just silence. Victor remained. But now, his presence felt fragile, like a monument weathered by truth. He passed Camille in the hallway once, he didn't sneer, didn't scold. just nodded quietly, unsure of how to face the daughter he had underestimated for too long. Camille returned to her desk, not the reception desk. Her name now appeared on a new office door. Camille Hart, Director of Client Relations. The staff watched. Not in pity. In awe. This wasn't the story of someone clawing their way up through revenge. It was a story of someone who never left the ground, because she was the foundation all along. Later that week, Camille sat alone in her office when she found a handwritten note slipped beneath her door. No name. But the handwriting was familiar. It read, "Camille, you've always had more strength than I knew how to handle. I see that now. You didn't just survive this, you transformed it. I don't expect forgiveness. But I want you to know I'm proud of you. Dad." She folded it quietly. No, it didn't undo the past. But it was a start. Not a rewrite. But maybe, finally, a reckoning. It had been a week since Camille Hart sat at the boardroom table, not as an afterthought, but as a force. The office still buzzed with cautious energy. Not chaotic, but alert. Staff whispered when she passed, not with derision anymore, but with curiosity, even admiration. They had seen something shift, and while most couldn't name it, they could feel it. The company's gravity had changed. Her new office wasn't large, but it was hers. No longer at the front desk, she now sat on the third floor beside client strategy leads and executive liaisons. The placard beside her door read, "Camille Hart, Director of Client Relations." She didn't throw out her old desk knickknacks. The small cactus her coworker had gifted her years ago still sat on the shelf, and her handwritten notes from back when she was just the receptionist were neatly organized in a binder. This wasn't about starting over, it was about carrying forward what they had once ignored. On her second Monday in the new role, Camille called a meeting, not with executives, but with junior staff. She gathered interns, entry-level associates, and overlooked support personnel in the small presentation room off the main corridor. Many of them looked nervous, confused. Why would someone in her position call them? But when Camille stood at the front of the room and shared her story, not just the takedown, but the years of silent dedication, invisible labor, and overlooked efforts, something clicked in their eyes. "I used to believe if I worked hard enough, eventually someone would notice," she said. "But the truth is, you don't wait to be seen. You build your light so strong they can't look away." That afternoon, she announced a new internal initiative. Frontline to Future. A mentorship program focused on empowering those often relegated to the background. Camille wanted no one else to go through what she had, sacrificing, overperforming, only to be forgotten. She paired rising voices with seasoned leaders, facilitated cross-department mentorships, and required department heads to attend quarterly open forums where assistants and junior staff could speak freely. The impact was immediate. People started staying late again, but not out of fear. Out of inspiration. Those who once shuffled silently now stood taller. Because now, they weren't just working for Silverpine. They were helping to reshape it. At home, Camille reflected on all of it. Not with bitterness, but with clarity. Her father, Victor, had been quiet since that day. Not cold, just distant. Like he was slowly recalibrating who his daughter actually was. They crossed paths occasionally at leadership meetings, shared polite nods, but hadn't spoken since the letter. One Friday evening, she found another envelope on her desk. Inside was a second handwritten note. "Camille. I didn't see it before. That's my fault. I built this company with discipline and drive. But I see now. You're rebuilding it with something stronger. Dignity. Dad." She stared at the note for a long time before tucking it into the same binder where she kept her old task logs and client call notes. A silent archive of the journey. She hadn't needed his approval. But the acknowledgement? It still meant something. Around that time, Mr. Desai called her into a meeting, just the two of them and a view of the harbor. "The joint venture is back on," he said. "But I've added a clause." Camille raised an eyebrow. "A clause?" That you oversee the transition team personally. Not as a figurehead. As a decision-maker. She paused, then nodded. Understood. Desai smiled. Camille, you're not here because you proved your worth. You were always worthy. You're here because you refused to let them write you out. Within 3 months, Silverpine looked and functioned differently. Camille implemented direct client feedback loops. She streamlined communications so clients weren't tossed between departments. She even created a recognition program, the Bridge Award, for those who held everything together quietly. It became the most respected honor in the office, even more than sales quotas or high-profile pitches. The first recipient? Denise, the marketing coordinator who once passed her the flash drive that exposed the truth. Sometimes being brave doesn't mean speaking the loudest, Camille said at the award ceremony. It just means refusing to look away. Her brother Brandon never returned. After stepping down, he'd gone quiet, his exit more rumor than fact. Some said he was starting over. Others said he was reconsidering his leadership style. Camille didn't chase the truth. It wasn't her story to carry anymore. She had her own now. The greatest shift, though, was internal. For years, Camille had waited to be invited. To be called forward. To be acknowledged. But no more. She no longer needed someone else's spotlight. She had built her own flame. And now, she was using it to light the way for others. One morning, as she walked past the front desk, the very place she had sat for nearly a decade, she stopped. A young woman sat there now, fresh-faced, scanning her computer nervously. Camille paused, then walked over and offered her a warm smile. "Hi, I'm Camille," she said. The woman blinked. I know. I mean, yes. I've heard about you. You used to." Camille laughed softly. "Sit right where you are?" "Yeah." The receptionist's eyes widened. "Wait, you were?" "I was," Camille said, nodding. "And if you ever need help, or want to learn more, my door's always open." As Camille walked away, she heard the woman whisper under her breath. "Whoa." And that meant more than any promotion ever could. She had reclaimed her name, her story, her legacy. Not with vengeance. With vision. And now? Camille Hart was no longer just remembered. She was respected. 6 months had passed since Camille Hart walked back into the boardroom and changed everything. The company she had once held together in silence now moved with her voice at its center. It didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen easily. But it happened, piece by piece, breath by breath, policy by policy. What had started as a quiet rebellion became something more, a movement within Silverpine Innovations. The cracks she exposed didn't destroy the company. They revealed its weaknesses, and from there, Camille helped rebuild it with stronger bones. She never tried to erase the past. She didn't rebrand the company or scrub its missteps. Instead, she made sure every lesson lived in the foundation of what they created next. And the best part? She wasn't alone anymore. The mentorship program Frontline to Future had grown faster than she anticipated. By spring, it had matched over 30 junior employees with mentors across departments. Entry-level staff, who had once hesitated to speak up, now contributed in strategy meetings. One of the youngest interns, Jonas Perez, pitched a client onboarding automation idea during a team huddle. Instead of being brushed off, Camille had backed him. It worked. The tool was rolled out within a month, saving the company time and money, and Jonas received a full-time job offer before he'd even graduated. Camille watched him receive his offer letter with tears in his eyes and thought, this is the legacy I want to leave. Not revenge. Not power. Opportunity. Her relationship with her father, Victor, remained cautious, but there were moments. Quiet moments that felt like small bridges being rebuilt. They didn't talk about the past directly. He never repeated the apology from his letter. But one day, after a particularly successful pitch meeting with a new international client, he stopped outside her office, cleared his throat, and said, "I heard the client requested you by name." Again. Camille didn't look up from her notes. They trust consistency. Victor nodded. Then let's make sure they keep getting it. That was it. But it was enough. He no longer looked at her like someone he couldn't figure out. He looked at her like someone he finally saw. Brandon, however, never resurfaced. After stepping down, he sent no messages, made no effort. Rumor had it he'd moved across the country and joined a consultancy firm, quiet, behind the scenes, far from his father's shadow. Camille didn't miss him. She missed who he should have been. But she had stopped mourning potential. She was too busy building reality. Every morning, she passed the reception desk. Sometimes, she paused to chat with Usha, the new hire who had replaced her. Other times, she simply offered a smile. But she never walked past without remembering. That desk had been her crucible. Her proving ground. Her origin story. It wasn't beneath her now, it was part of her. One Friday afternoon, she received a call from Mr. Desai. "Camille," he said warmly, "I am hosting a summit next quarter. Cross-sector leaders. Not just tech. Education, health, logistics. I want you there." Camille leaned back in her chair. "You sure I belong in a room like that?" Desai chuckled. "I'm not sure the room belongs without you." The invitation was formalized a week later. And with it, a feature in Innovate Global, profiling her as one of the top 20 emerging leaders in relationship-driven tech strategy. The headline read, "The woman who changed her company from the reception desk up." That night, Camille sat in her apartment, the magazine folded on the table beside her. She didn't post it online. Didn't brag. Instead, she took a quiet moment, lit a candle, and opened her old binder. Inside were notes from her first year at Silverpine, training schedules, conference call outlines, scribbled reminders to pick up catering. At the time, they felt like minor tasks. Insignificant. Now, she saw them for what they were, the scaffolding of something bigger. She pulled out the handwritten note from her father and added a new sticky note beneath it. "Legacy is not the name they give you. It's the impact they can't forget." The following week, Camille announced a new extension of Frontline to Future, a scholarship fund for young professionals who wanted to enter corporate operations but couldn't afford formal training. The company backed it. So did Desai. So did 5 other partners who had come to value Camille's vision. She named the fund after her mother, the Eliza Hart Foundation, in memory of the woman who once filled their home with lavender and always told Camille, "What matters most is how you show up, not what they call you." At the first scholarship ceremony, Camille stood before a crowd of students, interns, and professionals, some just starting, others restarting, and delivered a speech that echoed the quiet power she had spent years cultivating. "I used to think my job was to prove myself," she said. "To keep showing up until someone noticed. But I was wrong. You don't need someone's permission to lead. You don't need a title to matter. What you need, what we all need, is the courage to believe our work is worthy, even when others don't see it yet." The room erupted in applause. Not loud, not showy, but sincere. Just like Camille. Years later, when people told the story of how Silverpine turned itself around, they often started with that infamous boardroom meeting, the one where a receptionist stepped into a room she wasn't invited to and changed everything. But those who knew the whole story knew better. They knew it began long before that. It began with every unnoticed save, every fixed client issue, every quiet morning she opened the office while the city still slept. It began with the work no one wanted credit for, until someone finally did. Camille Hart never chased legacy. She built it. One forgotten task at a time. One unseen act at a time. One reclaimed voice at a time. And in the end, that voice, steady, strong, and unshakably hers, became the one others followed. Not because she demanded power. But because she earned it. And made sure the next ones wouldn't have to fight so hard to do the same.